He used to regale his guests with that old nostrum, all political careers end in failure, but he was right. Today, David Cameron, who won a surprise general election victory only just over a year ago, is out of politics altogether as he steps down as an MP.
As a former Prime Minister, it is very difficult, I think, to sit as a backbencher and not be an enormous diversion and distraction from what the government's doing. I don't want to be that distraction.
So what will his legacy be? And has he only resigned so he can fill his boots with cash? Also on News at 10 tonight. She's down, but is she out? Could Hillary Clinton's fall and her team's evasiveness end up costing her dear? Is it time to legalise medical marijuana? A special report from Amsterdam as a group of MPs prepares to recommend its use. And the Great British Break-Up, the smash hit show Bake Off, is leaving the BBC.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. Remember David Cameron? Well, to be fair, this summer 2 months has felt like a very long time in politics. He was the Prime Minister who said he would stay on even if he lost the EU referendum, but didn't, and then insisted he would remain as an MP, but now won't. I don't want to be a distraction, he said today. We'll come to why he's going and what he might be doing next in a moment. But first, how Mr Cameron told our Deputy Political Editor Chris Shipp he was walking out of Westminster.
A man who won an election less than 18 months ago, a man who was Prime Minister just 2 months ago, and tonight a man who can't even sit in the House of Commons as he's no longer an MP. Moments after David Cameron broke that news to Theresa May this afternoon, he explained why to News at 10.
I support her, I support what she's doing. She's got off to a cracking start. Obviously, I'm going to have my own views about different issues. People would know that. And that's really the point. As a former Prime Minister, it is very difficult, I think, to sit as a backbencher and not be an enormous diversion and distraction from what the government's doing. I don't want to be that distraction.
And what exactly could that distraction be? He says it's not connected to Theresa May's speech just 3 days ago on expanding grammar schools, but listen to his answer and you might agree it's a policy he didn't, and clearly still doesn't, think will work.
There's lots of merit in the policy, but frankly I don't want to get into the wheres and whyfores of this individual policy.
Given what you've said about grammar schools, it rather suggests you simply do not support their expansion.
My announcement today is not about grammar schools. There's no connection with grammar schools. It's purely one of timing.
So a distraction David Cameron will no longer be on this or any other subject, not least as a Tory MP. Mr Cameron began his life as the Witney MP in 2001, a young and fresh-faced Tory when voters thought the Tories were no match for Tony Blair.
We didn't do enough to get them excited about what the Conservative Party offered.
And within 4 years, he was leader and doing what he could to get voters excited, trying to change the public face and the direction of his party. But what shaped David Cameron personally and on the NHS politically was his son Ivan, who was born with multiple disabilities. He died in 2009.
We shouldn't forget that he had the tragedy of losing a child, a very young child. And the first time I met David Cameron was actually at an all-party meeting to discuss the needs of multiply disabled children and the difficulties they go through and their parents go through.
Mr Cameron proved to be pragmatic rather than ideological. When he fell short of victory in 2010, he formed a coalition, the like of which the UK had not seen since the war.
So of course people will focus on the immediate circumstances which brought about the end of his premiership, the European issue. But I hope people will also look back favourably by and large on his tenure as a Prime Minister of a coalition government, which was a very new thing.
And after pulling off a coalition, growing the economy, equal marriage, a referendum in Scotland and a second election victory, it was his failure on the EU which pushed this man out of politics for good.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it.
You will admit now, though, won't you, you will be remembered mostly for taking this country out of the European Union.
Well, I'm sure I will be remembered for keeping that pledge to hold a referendum, when many people thought that promise would never be kept. But I hope people will also look back at the time when we did create a stronger economy. 1,000 people found work for every day I was Prime Minister, and we did make some important social reforms.
He says he doesn't know what he'll do next. I'm only 49, he told me, so he feels there is a book or another job in him yet. Chris Ship, News at 10, Whitney.
So David Cameron, the architect of the phrase "we are all in this together," is in fact branching out on his own. As we heard in Chris's report, he was being somewhat cagey about his future plans, but based on the form of recent holders of the office of Prime Minister, austerity, another of his watchwords, is unlikely to feature too much.
Maybe gone some time.
He has come a long way from the days when he took reporters literally to the ends of the earth in an attempt to demonstrate that his party really had changed.
Well, I think shadow cabinet meetings will be shorter if we are.
In political terms, he came from nowhere, and his success was notable, with 2 election victories to his name after all. His friends always insisted he was motivated as much as anyone by time-honoured public service ideals. So why has he stood down so suddenly? Well, put bluntly, probably 2 things. He's worked out already he's likely to agree with practically nothing Theresa May is going to do, and he wants to make money without having to declare every penny he earns and from whom, as all MPs have to do. So what are the prospects? Well, Gordon Brown became the UN Special Envoy for Global Education. He's written 3 books and is paid handsomely for speaking engagements, reportedly at around £65,000 a go. Mr Cameron may be hoping more for Tony Blair's kind of income. He's worth an estimated £60 million. He was paid nearly $5 million for his autobiography. He advises governments and companies around the world and is said to earn up to £250,000 per speech. So how will history remember him? Perhaps, above all, for his demeanour in office.
The thing that I was reminded about David Cameron was the lines from Rudyard Kipling, and he said if you can meet triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same. What he was able to do is, when he had very bad news or very good news, was take it in his stride, not get overexcited. And I think that sometimes people interpreted that as being a bit relaxed. In fact, it was a very good temperament for being Prime Minister and meant that he was able to do the job effectively, not that actually he was indifferent to it.
But of course, his principal legacy is taking us out of the EU, and some former allies may find that hard to forgive.
I think he's obviously disappointed, and he's obviously decided he's young enough to do something else, and it's a pity really. He would have been a very good contributor to the House of Commons.
What do you think his legacy will be?
Well, I think it was a good government, but his main legacy, unfortunately, will be accidentally taking us out of Europe by calling this referendum.
And what we end up thinking of him may depend on that. Triumph or disaster, we will see. And Chris is here to talk about this. Chris, obviously as an MP you have to, declare all your earnings. As soon as you're not an MP, you don't accept to the Inland Revenue. Was that part of his motivation?
Well, I think, look at the fact. As an MP, you earn £74,000 a year and you're hindered by all those rules and regulations about your earnings. Clearly, if Mr Cameron's not an MP, then he won't be hindered by those sort of things. And yes, there is a lot of money out there to be earned. Look at Tony Blair. Actually, even look at former Tory leaders like William Hague, who charges rather a lot of money to make speeches after dinner now. That said, I did ask David Cameron what are his plans. He said he simply doesn't have any. And he did say to me that he'd like to do some form of public service connected to some of those areas he championed. Now, from that, we can guess, perhaps if we look back at his last conference speech last year, was some form of social mobility, not massively dissimilar to what Theresa May is trying to do, albeit slightly different, and other areas, maybe tax reform, those sort of things. But he says he wants to do something around the area of public policy, but he simply wouldn't say. So either he hasn't got anything lined up, or he just doesn't want to tell us on this day.
It is early days, admittedly, in the May regime, but the impression we get, Brexit, grammar schools, is that she's going to be pursuing policies, very few of which he is actually going to agree with. So I'm imagining that is his other primary consideration in stepping down now.
Yes, and she dumped a lot of his lieutenants, don't forget. George Osborne, she got rid of Michael Gove, all those sort of Cameroons. And actually some of the MPs, Tory MPs, who are opposed to Theresa May's grammar schools in England, the new selective schools, said there were a lot of them in the Commons chamber today, all sitting in the same sort of area. Perhaps the new awkward squad, who knows? But, I mean, I asked David Cameron a number of times, do you support the grammar school policy? He would only say, there are merits to this policy, and therefore, clearly, there are some things that he doesn't like about the grammar schools policy as well. And although they're connected in timing, clearly, Theresa May spoke on Friday, David Cameron spoke today, he insists it's not that one policy area, but I think if you set it in the context, that is what this is about. He simply can't speak his mind because he knows he's got, a constituency and he doesn't agree with her.
OK. Thank you, Chris, very much. Now, it is mixing metaphors, perhaps, to be talking about false dawns in connection with the sunset ceasefire that began in Syria this evening, if indeed you can call it a ceasefire. But optimism is certainly in short supply. Even in the run-up to it tonight, barrel bombs were still being dropped on the city of Aleppo. So could it be the start of something?
Even in the hours before the ceasefire came into effect, it was war as usual in Syria, with heavy bombardments by government planes on Aleppo. The Syrian regime intent on pressing their advantage to the last minute in a city which has been besieged by them and starved for months. The ceasefire comes on the holy Muslim day of Eid al-Adha, which President Assad celebrated this morning in the Damascus suburb of Daraya. Only a week ago, he would have been dead if he'd set foot in this neighborhood. It was a stronghold of militant groups opposed to him. But now, after ferocious fighting and bombardment, it is in his firm grip. By coming here, he said, we want to send a message that the Syrian government is determined to recover every area from terrorists. His swagger and confidence reflected the sense within the regime that the momentum is with them. Little wonder rebel groups fear this latest ceasefire, however temporary, will only help him and his regime. Crucial to the ceasefire is the Syrian regime agreeing to suspend airstrikes on rebel-held areas. It has also agreed to relax its hold on the besieged areas of Aleppo to allow humanitarian aid through. But although some rebel groups are on board, including the Free Syrian Army and the influential coalition of groups known as Ahrar al-Sham, they are reluctant participants. And in large swathes of Syria, fighting will continue. The US and Russia plan to coordinate airstrikes against their common enemy, the extremists of Islamic State and Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, the group formerly associated with al-Qaeda. But once the Syrian government that had been bombing them welcomed the ceasefire, the mood amongst Aleppo's weary people changed. And for once, there was a sense of relief that a pause in the fighting could become a reality. Yet despite this, many of Aleppo's residents remain skeptical.
We don't have a trust anymore in ceasefires, in UN. They always let us down. Ceasefire always didn't work. The regime and Russia warplanes always break these ceasefires.
But this ceasefire will not bring peace to Syria. It won't even bring an end to all fighting. Both the US and Russia have said they will continue to strike Islamic State and the many other jihadist groups in this complex civil war. Raghi Omar, News at 10.
Say what you like about Donald Trump, and plenty of people have, he did at least send Hillary Clinton a get well message today after her pneumonia-induced stumble yesterday. How touching, you may say, except that nothing in this election is, of course, quite that simple. He is also trying to turn the matter to his advantage with a promise to release his own medical records soon. That said, it isn't Mrs. Clinton's health that is becoming the major issue, but the lack of openness from her team about what has been going on.
Clinton cancels the trip to California after abruptly leaving a 9/11 ceremony at Ground Zero.
As a presidential candidate who sought to play down health issues, the American networks will make difficult viewing for Hillary Clinton today.
Hillary Clinton will no longer be making a campaign trip to California, scheduled for Monday and Tuesday.
Yesterday's very public collapse is all over the American media, and it's hardly surprising. A potential future commander-in-chief apparently being hoisted into her van, feet dragging, head lolling, and clearly unwell, is subject to much discussion. Despite being back in front of the cameras within 2 hours, what makes this an integrity issue as well as a major campaign one is that her team initially said she'd simply overheated, only conceding she'd been diagnosed with pneumonia much later in the day.
Are you feeling better?
Yes, thank you very much.
With the 68-year-old recovering at home, her team have promised more medical reports as they seek to redress suspicions of secrecy.
It really is the case that there's no other undisclosed condition. The pneumonia is the extent of it.
She also lacks the mental and physical stamina.
Donald Trump was surprisingly restrained in his response, but vowed to release his own medical records.
It was quite sad, to be honest with you, and I hope she gets well soon. No satisfaction, believe me, whatsoever.
So far, Clinton has resisted making public too much medical information and laughed off a cough last week.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic.
But her political standing means history notes her past, including the concussion which led to a blood clot in 2012. She had to wear special glasses to counter double vision, and that was the second clot she'd had.
It's an important issue, but
Susan Page has reported on the Clintons for decades.
Hillary Clinton's biggest political vulnerability has been the perception of many Americans that she's not honest and trustworthy, that she's not transparent. And this reinforces that idea that she isn't straightforward. During her own tenure as Secretary of State, we saw questions about the Benghazi affair. And during this campaign, it's been dominated by questions about her use of a private email server when she was Secretary of State.
It's 57 days until America decides, and the candidates' health and how open they are about it is likely to be a major issue. Hillary Clinton will be able to take tablets to clear up her infection, but trying to sort out the problem that the American people have with her integrity may be much more difficult to solve. Emma Murphy, News at 10, Washington.
Now, if you buy things online from John Lewis, Next, Debenhams and ASOS, chances are they are delivered by Hermes. Now, unless you're having a very bad or good day, depending on your point of view, this is not the ancient Greek messenger of the gods, but the second biggest delivery company after Royal Mail. Now, though, the way it treats and pays its drivers could be under investigation by the tax office. There are claims some get below the minimum wage, but the boss of Hermes told us she is hurt by the claims.
The name Hermes may not be familiar, but order online with the likes of Next, Debenhams and John Lewis, and the chances are you'll be paid a visit by one of their couriers. Sherry Nolan used to deliver parcels for Hermes. She says she was bullied into working 6 days a week and that the company's demands were relentless.
At my granny's funeral, I'm standing up round the corner on the phone to my field manager when my granny's hearse is going round the corner. So instead of me being with my family and with my kids, you're getting threatened with your work.
10,500 couriers work for Hermes, although technically they are self-employed. They're paid for each parcel they deliver rather than by the hour. And as they are self-employed, they don't qualify for either sick pay or holiday. And they're not legally entitled to either the national minimum wage or the living wage of £7.20 an hour. According to a new report, some couriers earn as little as £3 an hour. Hermes UK rejects that idea and insists staff aren't forced to work through illness and bereavement.
I don't recognise some of the allegations that are out there in terms of the style of our business. We're actually quite a family-run type business. We are open, we're supportive, we're caring. I care.
The head of the TUC told me she believes an unacceptable number of companies are thriving by exploiting their staff.
We're now seeing millions of workers, not just on 0 hours contracts, but full self-employment, agency contracts that seem to go on forever without ever achieving permanent rights. I think a lot of people are worried that the balance of power has gone too far in favour of employers.
Hermes will soon start deliveries for Sports Direct, another company accused of mistreating workers. And they're not alone. The GMB union is in the process of taking legal action against Uber, arguing their 12,000 taxi drivers should be given permanent contracts. A verdict is expected next month. Joel Hills, News at 10.
Plenty of claims have been made over the years for the medical properties of cannabis in alleviating the effects of various conditions. But of course, you can't get it on the health service, at least not yet. Tomorrow, a group of MPs will make the case for legalising cannabis for limited medical use. It has already been decriminalised in a number of countries and many now allow it to be used. In the Netherlands, for example, it has been available in the country's pharmacies since 2003. Other European countries, like the Czech Republic and Romania, followed suit. And in the United States, it can be prescribed in almost half of the states, including New York and California.
Cannabis on prescription is already a reality in Holland. And this woman is now living there so she can access it legally and, she believes, safely. Penny has multiple sclerosis and other complex medical conditions which leave her in constant pain. Pain bad enough for her to give everything up and move here to access medical cannabis legally.
Just improves everything. I'm not in pain. It
ameliorates all my symptoms.
What difference would it make to you if you had prescription cannabis in the UK?
It would mean I could go home, and other people in the UK could benefit as well.
In Holland, cannabis is grown and manufactured under strict pharmaceutical licence. Tomorrow's report will estimate that as many as 1 million patients in Britain could benefit if that were to happen here. And it's expected to recommend that it becomes available on prescription for as many as 60 specific medical conditions.
Here we grow our flowers.
Security's so tight, we weren't able to see his crop. But the chairman of this Dutch company says word is spreading about the medical case for the drug.
We had a lot of discussions already with people and patients definitely coming from the UK. Some of them even imported product which they obtained in Dutch pharmacies and brought it into the UK. As far as we know, there were no real problems.
In the UK, cannabis is illegal for both recreational and medicinal purposes. This report seeks no change to its status as an illegal street drug. It recommends limited use as a specially produced and controlled medicine only.
The UK government should pay attention to the evidence.
The chair of the MP's committee reviewing the law says it's time for change.
It'll save the NHS billions of pounds, in my view, in beds and consultations and the rest of it. The case is overwhelming. We've got the evidence, the policy, we just need government action.
But the British Medical Association and some doctors remain opposed.
Any substances which are to be legalised for medicinal use need to be done so through the proper channels, with proper safety testing and analysis by academics and scientists. I think one of the big issues with marijuana is that a lot of people don't appreciate its harms.
But an estimated 30,000 people in the UK, like Jacob, are now prepared to break the law to use small amounts of cannabis as medicine.
If you're taking the right amount for pain relief that you feel is right for you, then it's fine, it's so much better.
Tomorrow's report may not result in an immediate change in the law, but as other countries have decided to follow the Dutch example, it will fuel the debate here. Penny Marshall, News at 10.
You certainly feel that debate will run and run. Now, for 6 years, the Great British Bake Off has been the icing sugar on the Victoria sponge cake, you might say, of the BBC's entertainment schedule. But not for much longer. Bake Off will break off its links with the BBC when the current series ends. Relations between the two sides hit rock, or you could say soggy bottom, over cold, hard cash. So next year, it'll be on Channel 4 instead.
On your marks, get set, bake!
It is one of the most successful shows on television. The presenters of the Great British Bake Off, Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood, are household names. Its mix of culinary catastrophes and soggy bottom spectacles, the perfect recipe for success.
Who wants to eat some carpet?
I'll eat a bit of carpet.
But this will be the last series to be shown on the BBC, after the company behind the show, Love Productions, broke off talks to renew their contract. In a statement, Love Productions announced, after an extraordinary 6-year journey with the BBC, we are unable to reach agreement on terms to renew the commission. In response, the BBC said it hoped the company would change their mind and that Bake Off was a quintessentially BBC programme. Around 10 minutes later, Channel 4 revealed they would now be the show's new home. John Waite, winner of the third series in 2012, is sure nothing much will change.
Channel 4 are not going to mess around with its format, and if they do, they'll be stupid. I think everyone's going to have a very close eye on what they do with the show, and if they do anything, if they make one wrong step, I think it could be catastrophic. So I'm not concerned. I think it will remain the Bake Off.
So what's behind Love Productions' decision?
I think they were just expecting a lot more money by the fact that it is the most popular show on the BBC. The BBC trying to be a lot more restraining in the amount of money, particularly it's spending on formats, have decided that it isn't worth spending a lot of money, which probably would get quite a lot of condemnation from the public.
The big question now is whether its star presenters will follow the show to Channel 4. It will be no piece of cake recreating this much-loved television series. Nazanin Mashiri, News at 10.
Captain should lead from the front, right? And that certainly seems to have been the reaction of many in cricket to the safety-first decision of England's one-day captain Owen Morgan not to tour Bangladesh because of the difficult security situation there. The man who'll stand in for him as captain, Jos Buttler, was more supportive, telling us it was not an easy decision for any of them. Bangladesh has seen a rise in attacks by Islamic State in the past year. Last September, an Italian aid worker and a Japanese businessman were shot dead within a few days of each other in the capital, Dhaka. But the biggest attack was in July, when gunmen stormed a cafe, also in Dhaka, killing 24 people, most of them foreigners. It significantly raised the threat level in the country.
Far from the cricket grounds of Bangladesh, the man who'll be captaining England's one-day side there, wicketkeeper Jos Buttler, was celebrating as he turned out for his county side, Lancashire, this afternoon. He's been appointed skipper following the news last night that Owen Morgan had withdrawn. Opening batsman Alex Hales has also withdrawn.
Josh, I'm Ian Payne from ITV. How are you? Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're just
And at Lancashire's ground today, Buttler told me what he thought of Morgan and Hales' decisions.
As a colleague and a friend to both those guys, completely respect their decision, and you know, not for anyone it was an easy decision. There's cricket is a game at the end of the day, and there's a lot of things in the world that are a lot bigger than cricket. So as I say, as a colleague and a friend, completely respect their decision, and I know everyone in the dressing room does as well.
In Bangladesh right now, security across the country is already tight in the wake of terrorist attacks. And when England arrive, there's talk of snipers and even tanks being used to protect them.
They'll be kept in a bubble which actually keeps them within a hotel, which is effectively a fortified hotel, a secured hotel, and then taken by different routes to the ground or the training facility each day.
But if there's one man who should have strong views on the issue, it's the father of England bowler Stuart Broad, Chris Broad. He was on the Sri Lankan coach, which was peppered with bullets in Pakistan in 2009.
I would have no hesitation in going. The Bangladesh Cricket Board try their hardest to give us the security that is required.
And it seems the players, like his son, or here in Lancashire, agree with him. Ian Payne, News at 10 at Lancashire County Cricket Ground.
Finally, if there was a player, Will Bailey would have sailed home comfortably today. After he clinched gold, he jumped onto the table itself before the tears of joy started flowing. Who can blame him? His was one of 2 British golds, so a relatively quiet day by the standards of Paralympics GB.
Of the myriad of medals that Paralympics GB has picked up, the gold for best celebration surely goes to this man.
He's done it now, Will Bailey.
The table tennis singles title going to Will Bailey, a man who lost the final in 2012 and more than made up for it today.
To be honest, I didn't plan my celebration. I just thought, what can I do? You know, I've just achieved like literally my goal for the last 16 years. I've done something I never thought I could do, and I just sort of bounced up on the table and just thought, and once I got up there, I thought, what am I doing on the table?
He even got yellow carded for it by an unsympathetic official. But as he told me afterwards,
gave me a bit of confidence, you know, and just gave me like a meaning to actually do something.
The sport helped him through cancer as a child and adapting to the muscle wastage he was born with in his limbs. The idea coming from his grandmother.
She bought me the table tennis table, and whilst I was recovering from cancer, it gave me the opportunity to continue playing sport. So it was for her really, and I hope she was looking down on me and was really proud to see what I've achieved here today.
He says the team were laughed at back in Beijing, so bad did other countries think that they were. Now his coach is carrying him aloft on his shoulders.
It's my life. I don't really have too much outside of table tennis, so to have achieved what I've done, it's literally like my dream. My dreams come true, and sometimes when your dreams come true, you feel like jumping in the air and jumping on a table tennis table.
If the officials didn't particularly like him, neither did the crowd, understandably supporting his Brazilian opponent. But Bailey overcame both obstacles with a tenacity that has served him well in life, and now in sport too. Richard Pallo, News at 10, Rio de Janeiro.
A great story. Does kind of bring a tear to your eye. Let's just take a quick look at what might be happening tomorrow. David Cameron might not be the only one without a constituency soon. MPs will find out more about how the number of constituencies and therefore jobs will be cut quite substantially. And some parts of the country could be in for the warmest September day for more than half a century. Sun or not, I'll be here again tomorrow. Hope you join me. But for now, good night. Thanks very much for watching.